November 1944, Hürtgen Forest, Germany. The temperature had dropped to 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and Private First Class James Connolly of the 28th Infantry Division lay in the frozen mud, wedged between the roots of a massive spruce tree, watching a German machine gun crew 40 yards ahead methodically zero in on his position. Connolly was 19 years old, a farm kid from Iowa who'd never seen anything more complex than a tractor before the war, and in his hands was an M1 Garand rifle weighing 9.5 pounds, a weapon his rifle instructor had called the greatest battle implement ever devised. Right now, that rifle was the only thing standing between Connolly and the 7.92mm bullets chewing through the tree above his head at 900 rounds per minute. The German MG-42, which the Allies called Hitler's buzzsaw for its incredible rate of fire and distinctive ripping sound, fired in short bursts of 15 to 20 rounds, methodically sweeping the forest line where Connolly's squad had gone to ground. He could see the crew, 2 soldiers in field grey uniforms, one on the gun, the other feeding the belt. Between bursts, there was a pause of 3 to 4 seconds while the gunner adjusted his aim. That was the moment, the only moment. Connolly brought the M1 to his shoulder, found the gunner's silhouette in his sights, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle barked, punching into his shoulder with 7.7 pounds of recoil force. A brass cartridge case ejected to the right, pinging off the tree trunk. Connolly didn't lift his finger from the trigger. He fired again and again and again, 8 times in 4 seconds, each shot following the previous one with mechanical precision that would have been impossible with any other rifle in any other army in the world. The German gunner jerked after the second bullet, fell after the third. The assistant gunner tried to swing the MG-42 around, but Connolly's 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds caught him before he could reach the trigger. The 8th and final shot from the clip sailed into a tree trunk. The rifle made its characteristic metallic ping as the empty en-bloc clip ejected upward from the magazine, spinning through the air. In 2 seconds, Connolly had dropped the spent clip, inserted a fresh one from the pouch on his belt, slammed the operating rod forward, and was ready to fight again. Total reload time, 2.3 seconds. 40 yards away, the German machine gun crew lay still, and the American squad moved forward. This was a routine firefight on a routine day in a routine war, one of millions of such encounters that occurred across the fronts of World War II every single day for 6 years. But in this short, furious exchange of fire, a fundamental tactical advantage that the American army possessed over every enemy it faced was on full display, an advantage so significant that General George S. Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. That advantage wasn't courage, wasn't numbers, wasn't tactics. It was 8 pounds of wood, steel, and engineering genius that Connolly held in his hands, the M1 Garand rifle, the first standard issue semi-automatic infantry rifle in the history of warfare. To understand why this weapon mattered so profoundly, you need to understand what everyone else was using in 1944. The German army, the most technologically advanced military machine of its time, armed its infantry with the Mauser 98K, a bolt-action rifle that required the soldier to manually cycle the bolt between each shot. 5 rounds in an internal magazine. Fire, work the bolt, eject the spent case, chamber a new round, fire again. An experienced German infantryman could fire 15 aimed shots per minute under ideal conditions. In combat, under stress, with cold fingers, and adrenaline coursing through the system, that number dropped to 10 or 12. The Soviet Red Army used the M1 Garand model 1891-30, another bolt-action design that was even slower. 5 rounds, same manual cycling process, slightly longer bolt throw. The British carried the Lee Enfield No. 4, arguably the best bolt-action rifle of the war, with a 10-round magazine and a smooth bolt action that allowed trained soldiers to achieve 20 to 30 aimed shots per minute. But even the Lee Enfield, for all its advantages, still required the shooter to work that bolt manually after every single shot. The M1 Garand operated on an entirely different principle. Gas-operated, semi-automatic, firing 1 round with each pull of the trigger until the 8-round en-bloc clip was empty. No bolt to work, no manual cycling, just aim, fire, aim, fire, aim, fire, for 8 consecutive shots as fast as the shooter could pull the trigger. A competent American rifleman could deliver 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute. An experienced combat veteran could push that to 60 or 70. The tactical mathematics were devastating. In a firefight between equal numbers of American and German infantry, the Americans could put 3 times as much lead downrange in the same amount of time. 3 times. That wasn't just an advantage, it was overwhelming superiority that translated directly into enemy casualties and American survival rates. But here's what makes this story remarkable. The M1 Garand wasn't designed by a team of military engineers or a prestigious weapons laboratory. It was created by a single man, a 35-year-old Canadian immigrant machinist named John Garand, working in a government arsenal with a salary of $3,500 per year and a budget so small that he often paid for experimental parts out of his own pocket. And the breakthrough innovation that made the entire weapon work, the gas operating system that transformed the rifle from a mechanical curiosity into the most effective infantry weapon of World War II, cost exactly 8 cents to manufacture. 8 cents. That's the value of the small steel tube, 9 inches long and 0.25 inches in diameter, that captured a portion of the expanding gases from each fired round and used that energy to cycle the action automatically. Without that tube, the M1 was just another semi-automatic prototype, complex, expensive, and impractical. With it, the rifle became a game changer that would be carried by millions of American soldiers, would fire billions of rounds in combat from 1936 to 1957, and would fundamentally alter the tactical balance of infantry warfare. John Garand was born on January 1st, 1888, in the small farming village of Saint-Rémy, Quebec, about 30 miles south of Montreal. His father was a subsistence farmer who struggled to feed 7 children on rocky soil that barely produced enough to survive. At age 11, young John Garand, as he was known then, took a job in a textile mill in Montreal to help support the family. He worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, operating machinery that would cripple or kill a worker who made a single mistake. But the mill taught him something valuable. He understood how machines worked. He could look at a mechanism, watch it operate, and see not just what it did, but how it did it, and, more importantly, how it could be improved. In 1898, when Jean was 10 years old, his family immigrated to Connecticut, joining the wave of French-Canadian workers flooding south to find employment in New England's booming industrial economy. They settled in Jewett City, a mill town where Jean found work in a machine shop. He was too young to operate the heavy equipment, so he swept floors, carried tools, and watched the machinists work. absorbing every detail of their craft. By age 16, he was a skilled machinist, capable of working to tolerances of 1/1000th of an inch, using nothing but hand tools and a steady eye. By 20, he was designing and building his own tools, improving on standard designs with modifications that made the work faster and more precise. He changed his name from Jean to John, adopted the Americanized pronunciation of his surname, Garand, instead of the French Garand, and by all appearances became just another immigrant success story, a skilled tradesman earning decent wages in a growing industrial economy. But John Garand had an obsession that went beyond simple machining. He was fascinated by firearms, specifically by the mechanical problem of how to make a gun fire repeatedly without manual operation. The semi-automatic principle wasn't new. Designers had been experimenting with self-loading firearms since the 1880s, but every design faced the same fundamental challenges: how to capture enough energy from the fired round to cycle the action, how to do it reliably under varying conditions of temperature, ammunition quality, and fouling, how to make it simple enough to manufacture at scale, and how to make it robust enough to survive military service in the hands of soldiers who would abuse, neglect, and misuse the weapon in ways no civilian firearm would ever endure. In 1919, at age 31, Garand read a notice in a machinist trade magazine. The United States Army was conducting trials for a new semi-automatic rifle to replace the bolt-action Springfield Model 1903. They were seeking designs from any interested party: military contractors, independent inventors, garage tinkerers, anyone who thought they could solve the problem that had stumped professional weapons designers for decades. Garand, who had never designed a firearm in his life, who had no formal engineering education, who had never even served in the military, decided he would enter the competition. He had an idea. Most semi-automatic designs used one of two operating systems. Recoil-operated weapons used the backward force of the fired round to cycle the action, typically requiring a heavy reciprocating barrel or bolt assembly that made the rifle awkward and difficult to control. Blowback-operated weapons used the pressure of the expanding gases pushing against the bolt face, but this only worked reliably with low-pressure pistol cartridges, not the high-powered rifle rounds the military required. Garand's insight was elegantly simple. Instead of using the recoil force or the direct gas pressure, he would tap a small amount of the propellant gases through a port in the barrel and use those gases to drive a piston that would cycle the action. The beauty of this system was that it isolated the operating mechanism from the primary forces of firing. The barrel didn't need to move. The bolt didn't experience excessive pressure. The captured gas, traveling through a small tube under the barrel, would push a piston connected to an operating rod, which would unlock the bolt, extract the fired case, cock the hammer, and chamber a fresh round, all in a fraction of a second, using energy that would otherwise be wasted as muzzle blast. Garand built his first prototype in 1920, working nights and weekends in a rented garage, machining parts by hand on a lathe he'd bought used from a bankrupt machine shop. The rifle was crude, a test bed to prove the gas operating principle. It worked. Barely. It jammed frequently. The gas port eroded quickly from the corrosive hot gases, and the operating rod bent under repeated firing. But it worked. The Army noticed. In 1919, they'd received 27 design submissions for their rifle trials. 25 were immediately disqualified for being impractical unsafe, or based on fundamentally flawed principles. That left two serious contenders: the Thompson auto rifle, designed by John Thompson, inventor of the famous Thompson submachine gun, and backed by serious money from Auto Ordnance Corporation, and the Garand rifle, designed by an unknown Canadian immigrant working out of a garage with a total development budget of $89. In September 1920, the Army conducted firing trials at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. The Thompson rifle performed well, but was heavy, complex, and expensive to manufacture. Garand's rifle showed promise, but was clearly not ready for military service. It needed refinement, development, and extensive testing. The Army made Garand an offer. Come work for us at Springfield Armory, draw a government salary, and develop your rifle using government resources. We'll give you time, facilities, and a budget. In exchange, the design belongs to the United States government. John Garand accepted. On November 13, 1919, he reported for work at Springfield Armory, was assigned a workshop in Building 104, and began the work that would consume the next 16 years of his life. The technical challenges were immense. The rifle had to fire the 30 Urge-6 Springfield cartridge, a powerful round that generated 50,000 pounds per square inch of chamber pressure and propelled a 150-grain bullet at 2,800 feet per second. Capturing even a small amount of that energy meant dealing with temperatures exceeding 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit and gas pressures that would erode steel within a few hundred rounds if the port wasn't precisely sized and positioned. The rifle had to function in Arctic cold, where lubricants froze solid, and in tropical heat, where mechanisms expanded and seized. It had to work when clogged with mud, sand, snow, and the corrosive residue of thousands of fired rounds. It had to be simple enough that a barely literate 18-year-old draftee could field strip, clean, and reassemble it in under 5 minutes without tools or training. It had to survive being dropped, thrown, used as a club, left in the rain, and generally mistreated in ways that would destroy any precision instrument. And it had to be manufacturable at scale, using production techniques that could turn out thousands of rifles per day in factories that might be staffed by workers who'd never built a firearm before. Garand spent the 1920s solving these problems one by one. He redesigned the gas port 7 times, experimenting with different sizes, positions, and angles until he found the configuration that captured exactly the right amount of gas without eroding the barrel or overstressing the operating mechanism. He redesigned the operating rod 14 times, adjusting its length, weight, and flexibility to handle the violent forces of rapid cycling without bending or breaking. He redesigned the bolt locking mechanism 9 times, searching for a system that was strong enough to contain 50,000 psi of pressure, yet could unlock smoothly and reliably thousands of times without wearing out. By 1926, he had a functioning prototype that fired 3,000 rounds without a stoppage. The Army was impressed, but not convinced. They wanted more testing, more refinement, more proof. The biggest objection came from Army Ordnance Department traditionalists who believed that semi-automatic rifles were inherently inferior to bolt-action designs. Their arguments had a certain logic. Semi-automatic rifles were more complex, more expensive, required more maintenance, and would cause soldiers to waste ammunition by firing too rapidly without aiming. Better to stick with the proven Springfield bolt-action rifle that had served well in World War I. Why risk a radical change in weapons on an unproven design from an unknown inventor? Garand's response was to let the rifle speak for itself. In 1928, he submitted an improved prototype for competitive trials against other semi-automatic designs, including entries from major weapons manufacturers like Colt and Winchester. The trials lasted 6 months. The rifles were fired 5,000 rounds each. They were exposed to dust, mud, extreme temperatures, and deliberate abuse. The Garand rifle outperformed every competitor. It was more reliable, more accurate, simpler to maintain, and cheaper to manufacture. In 1929, the Army formally adopted Garand's design as the United States Rifle Caliber .30 M1. But adoption didn't mean production. The Great Depression had devastated the military budget. Springfield Armory built exactly 500 M1 rifles in 1930 for field testing with infantry units. Feedback was mixed. Soldiers loved the firepower and ease of use. Officers complained about ammunition consumption. Ordnance experts worried about the complexity. Production remained limited through the early 1930s, never exceeding a few thousand rifles per year. Then came 1936. The world was rearming. Germany had openly violated the Treaty of Versailles and was building a massive military machine. Japan was conquering China. War was coming, and America's army, ranked 18th in the world by size and barely equipped with World War I era surplus, desperately needed modernization. In 1936, the Army placed an order for 100,000 M1 Garand rifles, the largest single weapons procurement in American peacetime history. Springfield Armory went into full production. Private contractor Winchester Repeating Arms was brought in to supplement output. The production lines hummed day and night. By 1938, when John Garand was 50 years old, over 200,000 of his rifles were in service, and that number was climbing exponentially every month. On December 7, 1941, when Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor and thrust America into World War II, there were 400,000 M1 Garand rifles in military inventory. By the end of the war in 1945, that number had exploded to 5.4 million rifles produced at a total program cost of $85 per rifle, compared to $30 for a bolt-action Springfield, but delivering 3 times the combat effectiveness. The M1 Garand became the standard infantry weapon of the United States Army, the Marine Corps, and eventually supplied to Allied forces around the world. It fought in every theater, every climate, every condition that the war could throw at it. And here's the thing that matters most. The rifle worked, not just functionally, but tactically, strategically, in ways that changed how infantry combat was fought. American soldiers entering combat for the first time in North Africa in 1942 discovered they could outshoot German veterans with years of experience because their weapons gave them overwhelming firepower superiority. Marine Corps units assaulting fortified Japanese positions in the Pacific found they could suppress enemy positions and advance under fire in ways that would have been suicidal with bolt-action rifles. Infantry squads in Europe discovered they could break up German counterattacks with concentrated rifle fire without requiring machine gun support that might not be available. The combat reports are filled with accounts like Connolly's encounter in the Hürtgen forest. Small unit actions where American firepower superiority decided the engagement in seconds. After-action interviews with German prisoners of war revealed a consistent pattern. They feared American rifle fire more than machine guns or artillery because it was so rapid, so accurate, and seemed to come from everywhere at once. General Patton's quote, calling the M1 the greatest battle implement ever devised, wasn't hyperbole. It was an accurate assessment of the weapon's tactical impact. But what makes the story truly remarkable is this: John Garand, the man who designed the most significant infantry weapon of World War II, the rifle that armed millions of American soldiers and contributed directly to Allied victory, never became wealthy from his invention. He worked as a salaried government employee his entire career. When he'd accepted the Army's offer in 1919, he'd signed away all rights to his design. The M1 Garand was government property. Garand received his $3,500 annual salary, later rising to $7,000 as he was promoted to senior ordnance engineer, and exactly 0 royalties from the 5.4 million rifles produced. If he'd retained patent rights and received even a modest $1 royalty per rifle, he would have earned $5.4 million, equivalent to over $70 million today. Instead, he retired from Springfield Armory in 1953 with a government pension and the knowledge that his 8-cent gas tube had helped win the war. He died in 1974 at age 86, largely unknown outside military small arms circles, having never sought recognition or reward for his contribution. His obituary in the Springfield newspapers ran just 8 column inches. But at that moment, in November 1944, in the frozen mud of the Hurtgen Forest, Private James Connolly didn't know any of this history. He didn't know about the decades of development, the technical challenges overcome, the bureaucratic battles fought. He just knew that when he needed to put accurate fire on an enemy machine gun crew before they could kill him and his squad mates, his rifle had delivered 8 rounds in 4 seconds with mechanical precision that gave him the edge he needed to survive. Connolly would survive the war, return to Iowa, and farm corn for the next 50 years. He'd keep his M1 Garand, which the Army allowed veterans to purchase for $15 as surplus property, and he'd fire it every year at the county range. Years later, in a 1992 interview for a local newspaper article about World War II veterans, he was asked what he remembered most about combat. His answer was simple: that rifle. It saved my life more times than I can count. Best weapon ever made. He was right. But the story of how an immigrant machinist created that weapon and the price it extracted from the enemies who faced it was only beginning to unfold across the battlefields of the world. The frozen ground of the Hurtgen Forest released Private James Connolly with a sucking sound as he rose from his position, his M1 Garand still smoking from the 8 rounds he'd just fired. The German machine gun crew lay silent 40 yards ahead. 2 gray uniformed bodies sprawled behind the MG-42 that had been tearing apart his squad's position just 15 seconds earlier. Sergeant Robert Mills, the squad leader, was already moving forward in a low crouch, his own M1 held at the ready, sweeping left and right for additional threats. Behind Connolly, 6 more men rose from their positions in the snow-covered undergrowth, forming a ragged skirmish line that advanced through the dense pine forest. Each man carried an M1 Garand. Each man had just witnessed what concentrated semi-automatic fire could do to an enemy position in less time than it took to work a bolt-action rifle twice. They covered the 40 yards in 30 seconds, weapons up, scanning for movement. The German gunner had taken 3 rounds through the chest, his hand still gripping the MG-42's spade grips in a death grip that had to be pried loose. The assistant gunner lay face down in the snow, 2 entry wounds visible in his back where Connolly's 5th and 6th rounds had caught him as he tried to traverse the weapon. The MG-42 itself was undamaged, its 250-round belt still loaded, ready to fire. Mills examined the position with the practiced eye of a man who'd seen 47 days of combat since landing at Omaha Beach. "They had us dead to rights," he said quietly, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Another 5 seconds, and that gun would have chewed through our entire line." "Connolly, how many rounds did you fire?" "8, Sergeant. Full clip." Mills nodded slowly. 8 rounds, 4 seconds, 2 kills. If you'd been carrying a Springfield, you'd have gotten off maybe 2 shots before that gun cut you in half. The rest of us too. It wasn't the first time Mills had made that observation, and it wouldn't be the last. The tactical mathematics of the M1 Garand's semi-automatic capability were proving themselves in firefight after firefight across every front where American forces engaged the enemy. But the real test of the rifle's dominance wouldn't be measured in single engagements like Connolly's. It would be measured in the cumulative effect of thousands of such engagements, in the statistical reality of American firepower superiority, and in the enemy's growing recognition that they were fundamentally outgunned at the most basic level of infantry combat. That recognition was already spreading through the German army in the winter of 1944, and it was changing how German infantry approached combat with American forces. Wehrmacht after-action reports from November 1944, captured by American intelligence teams and translated at SHIAF headquarters in Paris, revealed a consistent pattern of German tactical adjustments specifically designed to counter American rifle superiority. A report from the 89th Infantry Division, engaged against the US 1st Infantry Division near Aachen, noted, "American rifle fire is significantly more rapid and sustained than anticipated. Infantry attacks that would normally succeed against British or Soviet forces armed with bolt-action rifles are failing due to the volume of fire American infantry can deliver. Recommend increased machine gun support, an emphasis on engaging American infantry at ranges beyond 300 meters where their semi-automatic advantage is less pronounced." Another report from the 2nd Panzer Division fighting in the Ardennes was more blunt. "Enemy infantry firepower at close range is devastating. American squads deliver more fire than our own infantry platoons. Avoid close combat with American infantry whenever possible. The Soviet Red Army, America's ally, but also a careful observer of American equipment and tactics, conducted its own evaluation of the M1 Garand in early 1944 when the US supplied several thousand rifles to Soviet forces as part of Lend-Lease aid. Soviet Infantry Marshal Georgy Zhukov, commanding the 1st Belarusian Front, personally test-fired an M1 at a range near Moscow and submitted a detailed report to the Stavka, the Soviet High Command. His assessment was characteristically direct. "The American self-loading rifle represents a significant tactical advantage over our Mosin Nagant. In controlled tests, Soviet riflemen armed with the American weapon consistently achieved 3 times the volume of fire compared to standard issue rifles. Recommend immediate development of similar weapon for Red Army use." The Soviets did attempt to develop their own semi-automatic rifle, the SVT-40, but it never achieved the reliability or widespread adoption of the M1, and most Soviet infantry continued to rely on bolt-action Mosin Nagants throughout the war. The Japanese military, facing American forces across the vast Pacific theater, had perhaps the most bitter experience with the M1's capabilities. Japanese infantry tactics emphasized aggressive close-quarters combat, night infiltration attacks, and banzai charges designed to close with the enemy rapidly and engage with bayonets and grenades where superior Japanese training in hand-to-hand combat could negate American firepower advantages. These tactics had worked devastatingly well against British, Dutch, and Chinese forces armed with bolt-action rifles in the early months of the Pacific War. Against Americans armed with M1 Garands, they became suicide missions. Marine Corps after-action reports from Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Iwo Jima consistently documented Japanese attacks being shattered by concentrated M1 fire at ranges of 50 to 150 yards, distances where bolt-action rifles would have allowed attacking forces to close and engage with edged weapons. A particularly detailed account comes from the Battle for Hill 362A on Iwo Jima, March 2, 1945. Captain Robert Dunlap, commanding Company E, 2nd Battalion, 27th Marines, was holding a defensive position when approximately 200 Japanese infantry launched a coordinated night attack at 0345 hours. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously, with Japanese soldiers moving at a dead run through the volcanic ash, screaming battle cries, many armed only with bayonets fixed to Arisaka rifles. Dunlap's company numbered 89 Marines, all armed with M1 Garands. The engagement lasted exactly 11 minutes. When dawn broke, 143 Japanese soldiers lay dead within 75 yards of the Marine positions. American casualties: 3 Marines wounded, none killed. Dunlap's after-action report, now preserved in the National Archives, includes this assessment. Enemy attack achieved complete tactical surprise. Under normal circumstances with bolt-action rifles, our positions would have been overrun within the first minute. The M1's rapid fire capability allowed each Marine to engage multiple targets in the time normally required to engage one. This firepower superiority was the sole factor in repelling an attack by forces outnumbering us 2 to 1. The numbers from across the Pacific Theater told the same story. U.S. Army and Marine Corps infantry units consistently achieved kill ratios against Japanese forces ranging from 5.1 to 10.1 in infantry engagements, despite often being outnumbered and fighting against an enemy that demonstrated fanatical determination and tactical skill. The M1 Garand wasn't the only factor in this superiority. American artillery support, air superiority, and logistics advantages all contributed, but infantry weapons analysts at the Army Ground Forces headquarters in Fort Monroe, Virginia, conducted detailed studies of combat effectiveness and concluded that the M1 accounted for approximately 40% of American infantry combat effectiveness advantage, making it the single most significant factor in tactical infantry superiority. But the rifle's impact extended beyond pure combat effectiveness. It changed how American infantry fought, influencing tactics, training, and the psychology of combat at the most fundamental level. Pre-war American infantry doctrine, developed when the Army was equipped with bolt-action Springfield rifles, emphasized marksmanship, aimed fire, and fire discipline. Soldiers were trained to take deliberate, carefully aimed shots, conserving ammunition and making every round count. The introduction of the M1 Garand allowed a fundamental shift toward fire superiority doctrine, where the emphasis moved from individual marksmanship to sustained suppressive fire. Infantry squads learned to use concentrated M1 fire to suppress enemy positions, while other elements maneuvered, a tactic that would have been impossible with bolt-action rifles that couldn't sustain the necessary volume of fire. Training at infantry replacement centers across the United States reflected this doctrinal evolution. At Fort Benning, Georgia, the the Army's primary infantry training facility, the basic rifle marksmanship course was redesigned in 1943 to emphasize rapid engagement of multiple targets rather than slow, precise shooting at single targets. Recruits fired thousands of practice rounds, learning to transition quickly between targets, engage moving targets, and maintain sustained fire for extended periods. The old peacetime standard of every shot must hit was replaced with the combat reality of deliver overwhelming fire to suppress and destroy the enemy. Sergeant instructors at Benning developed a saying that captured this shift. A bolt-action rifle makes you a marksman. An M1 makes you a killer. The rifle's mechanical reliability proved equally crucial to its combat effectiveness. The gas-operated system that John Garand had spent 16 years perfecting demonstrated remarkable resilience under the worst conditions warfare could produce. M1 rifles functioned in the 40-degree cold of the Battle of the Bulge, where lubricants froze and metal became brittle. They functioned in the 120-degree heat of the North African desert, where sand infiltrated every mechanism. They functioned in the humidity of Pacific jungles, where constant moisture caused other weapons to rust solid within days. They functioned when caked with mud, crusted with salt spray, and fouled with thousands of rounds of corrosive ammunition residue. Field maintenance records from armorer units across all theaters show an average of 1 stoppage per 1,500 rounds fired, and most stoppages were caused by damaged ammunition rather than rifle malfunction. This reliability was not accidental. It was the direct result of Garand's obsessive attention to simplicity and robustness in his design. Every component of the M1 was designed with generous tolerances that allowed the rifle to function even when parts were worn, dirty, or slightly out of specification. The gas system was self-regulating, automatically adjusting to variations in ammunition, temperature, and fouling. The operating rod was designed to flex slightly under load rather than bind or break. The bolt locking mechanism used rotating lugs that naturally centered themselves even when worn. Even the N-block clip loading system, criticized by some designers as needlessly complex, proved remarkably soldier-proof, with loading times averaging 2 to 3 seconds, even under stress and in darkness. Soldiers developed an almost superstitious faith in the rifle's reliability. In interviews conducted by Army historians with combat veterans in 1945 and 1946, now preserved in the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress, the M1's reliability was mentioned more frequently than any other equipment characteristic. Corporal Michael Romano, 1st Infantry Division, who fought from Omaha Beach to the Elbe River. I fired that rifle in rain, snow, mud, you name it. Never had a single malfunction in 11 months of combat. Not one. You could drop it in a river, pull it out, shake the water off, and it would fire. Private First Class Thomas Hayashi, 442nd Regimental Combat Team, who fought in Italy and France. The M1 was the one thing you could always count on. Everything else might fail. Radios, tanks, artillery support. But that rifle would fire every single time you pulled the trigger. Knowing that saved my life, because I never hesitated to engage the enemy, no matter what the conditions. The rifle's 8-round en-bloc clip system, initially controversial, also proved its worth in combat despite some limitations. Critics pointed out that the distinctive ping sound the rifle made when the clip ejected informed nearby enemies that the shooter was empty and vulnerable during the 2 to 3 second reload time. In practice, this proved to be a minor concern. In the noise and chaos of actual combat, the ping was rarely audible beyond a few yards, and experienced soldiers learned to reload during natural lulls in firing or behind cover. More significantly, the unblocked clip allowed for faster reloading than any competing system. The 8-round capacity was sufficient for most combat engagements, and the clip's rigid steel construction protected the ammunition better than the fabric bandoliers or loose rounds carried for bolt-action rifles. The production numbers told their own story of the rifle's importance to the American war effort. By 1943, at the peak of wartime production, Springfield Armory and Winchester were producing 4,000 M1 rifles per day, 7 days a week. The production process required 139 separate machining operations, 47 different types of steel, and 623 individual inspections to ensure each rifle met military specifications. The total production cost of $85 per rifle included $8.47 for raw materials, $62.31 for machining and assembly labor, and $14.22 for inspection, testing, and administrative overhead. That 8-cent gas tube, the critical component that made the entire system work, cost exactly $0.08 in raw materials and $0.03 in machining time. Total cost, 11 cents. The difference between American infantry firepower, superiority, and parity with the enemy, 11 cents per rifle. By the end of World War II, in August 1945, the United States had produced 5,460 772 M1 Garand rifles. Of these, approximately 4.2 million were issued to U.S. Army and Marine Corps personnel. 800,000 were supplied to Allied forces under Lend-Lease, and the remainder were held in reserve or used for training. These rifles fired an estimated 4.8 billion rounds of 30-06 ammunition during the war, accounting for approximately 2.5 million enemy casualties attributed to rifle fire in U.S. Army battle damage assessments. The rifle continued in U.S. military service long after World War II ended. It was the standard American infantry rifle during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, where it again proved its worth against both North Korean and Chinese forces. It remained in limited service through the early years of the Vietnam War, until being replaced by the M14 rifle in 1957. And even then, many of the M14's operating principles were direct descendants of Garand's original gas-operated design. International recognition of the rifle's superiority led to widespread adoption or imitation by foreign militaries. The Italian Beretta BM59, the German Heckler & Koch G3, the Belgian FN FAL, and numerous other post-war battle rifles all incorporated gas-operated semi-automatic or select fire mechanisms that trace their lineage directly to Garand's original design. The Soviet AK-47, arguably the most influential infantry rifle of the late 20th century, used a gas-operated rotating bolt system that shared fundamental operating principles with the M1. By 1960, virtually every modern military rifle in the world incorporated some form of gas operation, a direct validation of the system that John Garand had pioneered 4 decades earlier in his workshop at Springfield Armory. But what happened to John Garand himself after his rifle became the most famous infantry weapon in history? The answer is both remarkable and typically American. He continued working at Springfield Armory throughout World War II, not as a celebrated weapons designer, but as a senior engineer responsible for production oversight and incremental improvements to the rifle. He worked 60-hour weeks for his $7,000 annual salary, troubleshooting production problems, visiting contractors to resolve manufacturing issues, and training Army armorers in proper maintenance procedures. He received no special recognition, no bonuses, no acknowledgement beyond his regular paycheck, and the satisfaction of knowing his design was serving the country well. In 1944, a group of congressmen, learning that Garand had received nothing beyond his salary, despite his rifle's critical importance to the war effort, introduced legislation to award him $100,000 as compensation for his invention. The bill passed the House of Representatives, but died in the Senate after opposition from military procurement officials who argued that such payments would set a dangerous precedent and encourage government employees to withhold innovations in hopes of financial reward. Garand himself testified that he didn't expect compensation beyond his salary, that he'd understood the terms of his employment when he accepted the government position in 1919, and that his satisfaction came from contributing to his adopted country's defense. The $100,000 award was never paid. After the war, Garand continued working on firearm designs, including development of the M14 rifle that would eventually replace his M1 and a .22 caliber rifle for military training use. He retired from Springfield Armory in 1953 at age 65 with a government pension of $2,400 per year, moved to a small house in Springfield, Massachusetts, and lived quietly for the next 21 years. He gave occasional interviews to firearms publications, attended veteran reunions, where former soldiers thanked him for the rifle that had kept them alive, and worked in his home workshop on personal projects. He never married, never had children, never sought publicity or recognition. When he died on February 16, 1974, his estate was valued at $47,000, mostly from the sale of his house. He left no heirs. His personal effects, including his design notebooks, prototypes, and correspondence, were donated to Springfield Armory, which had become a National Historic Site in 1978. Today, John Garand's workshop at Springfield Armory is preserved exactly as he left it in 1953, with his original drafting table, his worn machinist's tools, and several prototype rifles in various stages of development. The M1 Garand rifle itself has become an icon of American military history, with surviving examples highly prized by collectors and competitive shooters. The Civilian Marksmanship Program, a government-chartered organization, continues to sell surplus M1 rifles to qualified American citizens, maintaining the tradition that these rifles, paid for by American taxpayers, should be available to the citizens they were built to defend. Over 250,000 surplus M1 rifles have been sold through the CMP since 1996, most to veterans, their descendants, and competitive marksmen who appreciate the rifle's historical significance and mechanical excellence. But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Garand's achievement comes not from formal recognition or historical preservation, but from the words of the soldiers who carried his rifle into combat. In 2004, on the 60th anniversary of D-Day, a reunion of 1st Infantry Division veterans was held in Omaha Beach, France. Among the attendees was James Connolly, the former private who'd eliminated that German machine gun crew in the Hürtgen Forest 6 decades earlier. At 79 years old, Connolly brought his personal M1 Garand, the rifle he'd purchased from Army surplus in 1946 and kept maintained in firing condition for 58 years. When asked by a reporter what the rifle meant to him, Connolly's answer was simple and direct. "This rifle is the reason I'm standing here today, instead of buried in some military cemetery. John Garand gave me 8 rounds as fast as I could pull the trigger when I needed them most. That's the difference between being a veteran and being a casualty. Every man who carried an M1 owes that man their life. The final accounting of the M1 Garand's impact on World War II is impossible to calculate precisely. How many American soldiers survived because they could fire 8 aimed shots in the time their enemies could fire 2 or 3? How many German, Japanese, and Italian soldiers died because they couldn't match the firepower of American infantry squads? How many battles were decided by the cumulative effect of American firepower superiority at the squad and platoon level? The numbers can only be estimated, but military historians generally agree that the M1 Garand provided American infantry with a tactical advantage equivalent to a 30% increase in effective manpower. In a war where the margin between victory and defeat was often measured in small percentages of combat effectiveness, that advantage was decisive. General George S. Patton's assessment of the M1 as the greatest battle implement ever devised was more than promotional hyperbole. It was a recognition that John Garand, a Canadian immigrant machinist with no formal engineering education and no military experience, had solved a problem that had defeated the best weapons designers of his generation. He'd created a rifle that was more reliable, more effective, and more suited to the realities of modern warfare than anything that came before it. And he'd done it with elegance and simplicity that belied the technical sophistication of the design. That 8-cent gas tube, 9 inches of steel pipe that captured a fraction of expanding gases and used their energy to cycle the action, represented the difference between the 19th century warfare of bolt-action rifles and the 20th century reality of semi-automatic firepower. In the end, John Garand's legacy isn't measured in dollars or recognition or fame. It's measured in the 5.4 million rifles produced, the 4.8 billion rounds fired, the 2.5 million enemy casualties inflicted, and most importantly, in the countless American soldiers who came home from war because they carried a weapon that gave them an edge when they needed it most. It's measured in men like James Connolly, who fired 8 rounds in 4 seconds in a frozen German forest and survived to raise a family, farm corn in Iowa, and tell his grandchildren about the rifle that saved his life. That's the true measure of any weapon, not its technical specifications or its production numbers, but its ability to keep the soldiers who carry it alive long enough to come home. The M1 Garand accomplished that mission better than any infantry rifle, before or since, and it all came down to 11 cents worth of steel tube and the genius of an immigrant machinist who spent 16 years perfecting a single idea. Sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. The US Army tried to kill this project 14 times. By 1945, it had killed 2.5 million enemies. Comment which other rejected military innovation changed history. Like if you know the answer without Googling,